Hi, this is D.S. Yaxheimer, and this is another edition of The Spectre. And I'm going to be discussing, or no, talking about, because I have no one here to discuss it with, obviously, because I can't get anybody else to come on this little show, is Sociopaths. I know it's around the Halloween season, and people talk about horror movies and their favorite horror characters like Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees or Pinhead or Michael Myers or and how these people relate to real life serial killers. And for instance Ed Gein, he was someone, he lived with his mother for a long time, and he dug up graves, and he made he killed some people. He turned one of his victims or corpses, used some of the flesh to make lampshades and other things, and used people's skulls as bowls and kind of fucked up shit. And that's just one example. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre character of Leatherface is based somewhat on Ed Gein. And Ed Gein was pretty much one of the most twisted, sick individuals in history, at least the last during the 20th century. And of course we have other Jeffrey Dahmer was, of course, very, very fucked up individual, and there's no real explanation as to why those people did those things, any more than there is perhaps say why Michael Myers did what he did, other than he seemed to want to kill everyone who was related to his sister Laurie Strode in the subsequent sequels. And Freddy Krueger's his motivation is because he's going after the children of the parents who burned him, and Jason Voorhees is going after people who go to Crystal Lake, who go there to party and smoke weed and fuck, and then he kills them because while these two kids were getting it on, he drowned when he was a child. And again, that's a quick breakdown of a few horror villain origin stories. I mean, they're kind of like superhero origin stories in a way, except they went in a different direction. Decided to go out and murder people in terrible sequel after terrible sequel. But with serial killers and people like that, there doesn't seem to be any really, these days, there doesn't seem to be any big serial killers anymore. There's no Zodiac Killer, there's no John Wayne Gacy, there's no Ted Bundy, there's no the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez. There's it just doesn't. It seems to be these spree shooters, which is a whole other thing, and they're not. It's just a different. It's not the sort of you don't. They're just a completely different. I don't even know what to call. I mean, there's different ways they've tried to categorize these, psychologists and psychiatrists and people who study serial killers and killers in general. And I think that with the spree killers, it's some of it seems to stem off of, and there were, of course, spree shootings before, and one of the most notable and older ones was the Texas University of Texas and the clock tower, which everyone refers to. If someone's going psycho, they're going to wind up in the clock tower picking people off with a sniper's rifle. He killed around a dozen people, that individual, and I think he had a brain tumor. I didn't do that much research before doing this video. I should have. I apologize. But anyway, long story short. But it seems since the Columbine shootings of April 20th, 1999, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris seem to have had a string of copycat killers. And they, like the Virginia Tech one, he referenced, he had admiration for the Columbine shooters. I think the Aurora shooter who shot up the premiere of The Dark Knight Rises. It was a midnight showing, and they actually moved him to my home state of Pennsylvania. So he's James. Is it James Holmes? Like, not James Holmes. Jim. Is that his name? John Holmes is the porn star. James Holmes is the shooter, and actually, I think they both killed people. I think John Holmes, the porn star, did kill people in the infamous Wonderland murders, which is a whole other story. But he was apparently under coercion by a drug kingpin to kill some people. We ripped off that drug kingpin, but that's another story. But James Holmes, and his backstory is very vague. We don't even know why he did it. Or most recently, of course, it was Stephen Paddock, who was a retired accountant. He was 64 years old, decided to go get a suite in a Vegas hotel, about 32nd floor, and shoot a concert below, which is completely fucked up. But you just like, and you don't even know how to really process it. It's like, why would someone do something like that? What the fuck is wrong with people? The serial killers of the past, who was more like one victim at a time, and they lurked in the shadows. Now they're more like people who are, just pop into a place, wherever in the public, someplace, a mall, a theater, a school, college campus, and shoot people with automatic weapons, which is, of course, why everyone is it's such a contentious issue is gun control in this country. Which I won't really get into. I have my own thoughts on it, but I'm trying to get into like the motivation behind it, behind spree shooters. I don't know what I don't know what gets into these people. I mean, some of them were Columbine copycats, and it's sort of like you don't even know what the Columbine shooters, what exactly their motivation was. They did. I mean, there was journals and there was videos and all of that, and it was supposedly bullying and all this stuff, but there has to be something deeper and more fucked up to me to do something like that, because kids got bullied all the time. When I was growing up, I got bullied, and we didn't go home and get daddy's rifle and load it and go to school and shoot people up, because we knew back then that was a crazy response. You don't do that. Even if someone is an asshole and they're treating you like shit, it's school. It's just school. It's not going to be, forever. So I don't know what the spree shooter, what the psych profile would be for a spree shooter. Other than a lot of them seem to be white males who are, late teens to about maybe early 30s, it seems. Of course, the last one was 64 years old. So, I mean, really, how do you say, well, usually, because they did the same thing with serial killers. Well, serial killers are mostly white males between, 24 and, 35 or something like that. And there's been serial killers who weren't white males. They've been all sorts of races. They've been females throughout the United States and the world. So I don't really buy into a lot of these psych profiles, because it's just based on what knowledge you have before you. What is okay, well, a lot of them that we've caught or that seem to be operating, a lot of serial killers seem to be that. But there's serial killers are all very different. It's not just based on their race. They have different motivations, different fetishes, they're motivated either by sex, or they're motivated by resentment, or whatever it is. We don't know. I personally don't know, and I don't think a lot of profilers entirely know why some people go about their day normally and don't harm anyone else, and other people plot it out and they get off on it, and we don't really know exactly why that is. There's some serial killers, there's sort of this trifecta of they torture animals as children, wet the bed, and they intentionally start fires. And the majority of the people who do those three things do not become serial killers. So there's that small Venn diagram, where they converge, where that is the case. So that's not even necessarily a good predictor. but because they don't know. I mean, who knows why people do fucked up shit anyway? And I think a lot of, when we watch horror movies and stuff like that, the killer in the movie, and usually if it's a horror movie, it's someone maybe with a mask or doesn't talk, or they're definitely just, not. They definitely have they're socially dysfunctional. That's for sure, and I think that's the biggest problem. They don't know how to relate to people. First off the bat, so when you're talking about someone like Michael Myers, who spent his youth in a mental institution after killing his sister and gets out and he doesn't talk anymore, and he goes back to Haddonfield every year, usually to kill a relative or somebody like that. Usually that's what the sequels, the plot of the sequels were about. They would of course change things, and the canon isn't very they're not very big on maintaining the same canon when they do the Halloween movies, because they changed with the first basically run of movies, and there's like I think 8 or 9, I don't know. He never went to space though, at least like Jason did. Jason went to fucking outer space, which I think the next thing would be like if Jason and Michael Myers and Freddy and, well, Freddy's in your dreams. I don't know if they put him in space, but I think Leatherface, you can throw him in space. And like Ash from the Evil Dead movies could fight them. I don't know. I'm sure, I mean, it's already been dreamed up. I know, I'm not coming up with anything new here. But as those characters relate to real, like, serial killers, I mean, there are some parallels, but I mean, in a sense, like, Michael Myers in the movies isn't as dangerous as a spree shooter. He's as dangerous as most serial killers. And Jason Voorhees, the only thing with those two is they can't, like Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers, they don't die. And, Freddy Krueger comes back because he's basically he's already dead. And so, that's why because it's, of course, fictional and make-believe. A real serial killer you can kill. Either, and they can be stopped that way. Because Ted Bundy can never come back, and Jeffrey Dahmer can never come back, and Eileen Wuornos can never come back, just to name a few. But, of course, there's, I guess you would call them cinema counterparts, can, because of money. They're even making a new Halloween movie coming out in 2018 with Jamie Lee Curtis. It's an attempt to fix all the bad scenes, like they did with H2O 20 fucking years ago, which was all H2O was. The thing about that movie, and I will touch upon this briefly, is Halloween 20 years later, Halloween H2O, that was in 1998, which was the return of Laurie Strode, because Michael Myers tracked her down to to this. She was like the head of a private school in California. Tracked her down, okay, and that was the late 90s when the Scream movies were big. So the movie looked like a Scream movie. And the Scream movies were a spoof on Halloween. They were kind of a satire on Halloween and other slasher films. And then the Halloween movie that came out that was supposed to fix what was so fucked about the Halloween sequels looked like a Scream movie, which is why it sucked. And that's why they couldn't just, stop those movies with that. They couldn't make a good final film. But we're not necessarily talking about horror movies specifically. I'm talking about killers. And I guess maybe the difference between serial killers and spree shooters is what we got now. And it's partly, I guess, our gun culture and our attitude towards guns. Other developed countries don't have this attitude, and I think in some ways this country isn't very developed. I think emotionally and psychologically, America is about hubris, and it's like someone who's one of those assholes you work with, who never admits they're wrong. They might be a supervisor or a shift runner, maybe a manager, and some managers are actually pretty cool. I've had ones that are good. But the ones that don't, they never admit they're wrong. If you ever question them, they get fucking angry and pissed off and stuff like that. That's what America has become, because, and we have that angry boss as a president. who I would have to say is a very dangerous individual. While he's not necessarily a serial killer, I don't know. I think Donald Trump has probably killed somebody. He's probably done it, and his sort of Ray Donovan fixer came and like cleaned it up and everything like that. But I don't. But anyway, I mean, getting away from that, it's just, but this country, that's the attitude. We cannot change a fucking thing to make sure that automatic weapons are never, or at least as much as possible, we can prevent them from getting into the hands of deranged individuals. And we should really, I mean, I can't even tell you how much it fucking upsets me, and it has for years, since the Columbine shootings, which was horrifying. If you're any kind of a human being and you were not horrified by it, and you were not, and you didn't take pause, it didn't make you take pause to think about our culture's attitude towards guns, then something's wrong with you, I think. But that's just my personal feeling on that. But and we do have, I mean, I think that these people that do go out and do this, they are like 100,000 times more horrifying than any horror film villain or any of those people. I mean, even with, Leatherface, he has a chainsaw. You can at least run from him. If you had a fucking gun, you'd be screwed. You can't run. You can run from a big guy with a chainsaw. You have a chance of getting away with it. If it was just, people running around with chainsaws and shit, man. At least you can hear the chainsaw coming. So I think that's, to put it in sort of perspective there, the horror film villains when I'm growing up, I thought oh my god, if people like that existed in real life, holy shit, when you're younger, of course people like that did exist, but horror film villains are just, to really sum it up, are more like the serial killers that they at least used to report on. I don't know, of course there's serial killers out there operating in the United States and throughout the world, but you just don't hear about them. And it's of course overshadowed by just the epidemic of violent shootings in the United States, and the fact that we have no wherewithal to do anything about it. And it's inexcusable, but what are you going to do? And certainly nothing's going to get done about it anytime soon with the current administration. So there's just, you have to sort of kind of sit tight, strap in, and try to stay in this fucking roller coaster for the duration of the time Trump is in office, and hopefully this whole, which I would consider this a national crisis, will be over sooner than later. But in conclusion, I just think that's really what it is these days. It's hard to even get scared. Horror movies are more like entertaining in a more satirical way, because they're not even that scary anymore, because reality is like basically surpassing any horror movie these days, and that's the real fucking sad part, that you could just go to a horror movie and be entertained, and and you could walk out relieved knowing that isn't real life. And now real life is just, it's far worse. And anyway, that is that's been this edition of The Spectre. If you have any fucking comments or thoughts on this, you can, all you NRA people can just write some angry shit down there and threaten me and stuff like that. I always find those amusing, and all of that. And have a safe and happy Halloween, and all of that, and just enjoy it. It's one of my favorite holidays. Go carve a pumpkin and all that stuff. Go to a Halloween party, and just party safely, of course, and all of that. I'm not really being really bored now. Now it's a PSA announcement. Anyway, so I'm wishing you all a happy Halloween season, whoever watches this thing. and I'll be probably back in another week with another one of these episodes of this thing that few people watch. And I have one other note. I actually got flagged by YouTube for the content of my video, saying I wasn't making enough. These videos weren't getting enough ad revenue because ads. Some advertisers didn't want to put their ads before them because I swear sometimes and all of that, and for whatever. I mean, I don't make any money off this at all because I don't have enough subscribers or views or anything like that to start getting any money from ad revenue from my monetization. So I don't really get any. It doesn't make any difference. But for some reason, which the advertisers they're well within their rights to choose to put ads before my videos or not. I don't really fucking care. I don't make any damn money off it. YouTube makes money off of it, I guess, up until a point, and then once I get enough views and subscribers, I make money somehow. I wouldn't know that because I don't. Some other people, some other bigger channels and stuff like that, they're selling like merch and whatever and getting other sponsors. And if you have a lot of views, that works for you. I don't, so it doesn't matter. I can say any awful, horrible, offensive thing, even though most of my videos really are just packed with explicitives, and I don't really try to do that. Some of my older videos are have some of that where I'm swearing and I'm making fun of like reality shows and stuff like that, and it's just I don't even know how who saw it or whatever. Sort of they have their algorithm that goes and basically goes through and censors combs through content to see if there's anything offensive, and then the advertisers, well, I don't want to put an ad before that because he talked about that thing in an offensive way, and boo 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 boo, So that's how that fucking works, I guess. Oh, I just said the F word, so I guess I'm going to lose some ad money for YouTube for that one. So anyway, this has been another edition of The Spectre. I'm DS Yucksheimer, and happy Halloween.